Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Horror Magic on Heart Over Ego Radio. We're a podcast dedicated to healing the shame surrounding guilt. I'm your host, Jenny McDaniel, and today we have a wonderful Samhain special. We have my good friend Jennifer from Chattanooga. Jennifer, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining me. And we have Andrew from New Jersey. Andrew, how you doing?
Great, thanks.
Thanks for joining me. And today we're going to be telling scary stories. Normally I would have an interview-style show where I would interview some sort of sexual healer, but for today we're going to have a special scary story podcast. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrew, and he's going to start us off, and then we're going to bop over to Jennifer, and I'll go last. So Andrew, why don't you start us off with your favorite scary story?
Okay. This happened to me back in 2001. I believe it was during the summer, if I remember correctly. At that time, I was employed by the state of New Jersey for the court system. I was processing an individual. He got himself into trouble by, odd public behavior, and that's what the police picked him up for. They gave him a mental health evaluation, and he was in my office completing paperwork in order to get back home. He was from, I believe it was a Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. He was in his early 20s, but I found his demeanor to be childlike. He was in a giddy mood and seemed to find humor in almost all my questions. And he was sitting in a chair to the left of my desk, facing my direction. And he was leaning on his elbow, like leaning toward me, resting his chin on his hand. And his eyes were half open at this point. And I was explaining the paperwork to him. Suddenly, I saw a small break in the skin about an inch above his right eye. The skin opened to reveal a third eye. It looked up, down, and around my office, and then it focused on me. His other two eyes remained sort of half open. I froze, and I could hear him giggle. And suddenly the eye closed, and it was gone. It took about 3 seconds for the whole incident. I just tried to ignore what happened and just continued to explain the paperwork procedure. Before I had time to convince myself that I was seeing things, it happened again. The eye opened in my office and then stared right at me before closing a few seconds later. He began giggling again. At this point, I figured it's time for him to go, so I had him sign the paperwork and I sent him on his way. I never told my wife, my best friend, or my coworkers about this incident. I don't smoke, drink, do drugs, nothing, but I know what I saw. Recently, I felt the need to tell somebody, so I mentioned it to a Reiki master. She said it's possible I was seeing his third eye. The position of his third eye and his odd behavior could be due to his chakras being out of alignment. Any explanation sounded legit to me. I forget the guy's name, but, with a few hours of research, I'm sure I could find it, but I only know if I really want to. I might not even venture there. But,
that is so interesting. And what was that job that you were holding? What kind of position were you holding when you met this fella?
At the time, I was a probation officer.
Okay, interesting.
So
that's so interesting.
Yeah, because it was sort of like a misdemeanor, so he was fined, and we were just sending him to social services to get a bus ticket back home. And his basically, it was just a procedure to get him out of get his address and his contact information in case we need to reach out to him for any information. But I just when that happened, I just wanted to get him out as soon as possible. I wasn't scared.
Like, dude, you're tripping me out.
Right. But I didn't feel scared. I was more surprised. Like, I never felt that he was, going to harm me. But then I thought maybe this guy's possessed because, I've never seen him before or since. But, I know what I saw. And it was only maybe 3 years ago that I mentioned it to somebody because I figured it's far enough that, no one would remember this guy being in my office, anything like that. I felt it was safe to talk about it at the time.
It's incredible. And I remember reading the energy when you commented on the original post I put on the Horror Magic page about wanting guests to come on and tell scary stories. And I remember you giving me the gist of this story, and I looked into it energetically, and I'm seeing a very similar energy of when I looked into it before, which was, sure, it was him, but it was also you. So you had to have been very open at that moment. Maybe there was some interesting energy exchange between the two of you. Maybe you were being more empathetic that day, or maybe you were experiencing more intuition, but I definitely think it was a combination of both of your energies. And I would almost call you, if you're a social worker, probation officer type energy, I would call you a healer and a sensitive. So I would say it's probably a combination of both of your energies, but nonetheless, it was symbolizing his third eye right there in the center, which also could be symbolizing what's awakening in you, which would then be your third eye, because the view is in the eye or the ego of the beholder. So if I were to have been sitting right next to you with that same client sitting in front of both of us, I might not have seen that, and more than likely I wouldn't have seen that, which then would have put it on you two, probably being a combination of both of you getting some sort of extra sight or awareness. And, he could have been a little bit mentally off, which then could create some interesting energetics. Well, thank you so much for that story. I absolutely love it. And we're going to quickly go to a network commercial, and we will be right back to hear Jennifer's stories.
Welcome to Heart Over Ego Radio, a collection of podcasts designed to enhance your spiritual journey. Join us on Mondays with the Alchemy Sisters and Creating Heaven on Earth. Tuesdays, Star Medicine Podcast and KT Talk Show. Wednesdays, Political Star Talk. Thursdays, The Optimistic Wellness Podcast. Fridays, Turn Yourself In, Self-Mastery for the Intuitive Sensitive Empath, and The Witching Hour, as well as Horror Magic, a show designed to heal stigma around sexuality. Saturdays, Seen and Heard, a podcast about abuse, and Shining the Light on Sex Trafficking. And Sundays, Gather Round for One for All Is Love with Sonia Spirit. We are Heart Over Ego Radio. Find us on any podcast app, Facebook and Instagram. Search Heart Over Ego Radio.
Welcome back, everybody, from a quick break. I'm going to hand the mic over to Jennifer, and she's going to tell us a couple scary stories. What do you got for us, Jennifer?
Well, the first one I'm going to tell is actually a very true story. I grew up hearing my grandmother and my great-grandmother talk about it. And in the blizzard of 93, we had no power for several days. And that's what we did, though, was sit in the den of my Nana's house and with kerosene lamps, and they would tell me all these ghost stories. Anyway, this one's true. When my great-grandmother was about 10 years old, there was a man that lived not far from us at the time, but my great-grandmother lived right beside him, that killed his wife, 2 kids, and then he wounded 2 others. He also had a daughter away at college, so she wasn't, and then he killed himself. So, and one of the little boys actually ran to my great-grandmother's house. And so hearing her talk about this, it fascinated me. And I've been to the cemetery where they're all buried. It's such a creepy, eerie feeling, but I cannot wrap my brain around. This happened in 1931. And one of the news titles is Third Victim of Deranged Father's Hammer Attack Dies at Cedartown Hospital. Mother and sister are killed. But they just blows my mind. Anyway, so he killed his wife as she was sleeping. It doesn't mention in the paper about this, but my great-grandmother said the wife was actually pregnant. And then let's see, there was 2 boys that he killed, and then one of them he hit with a hammer, and that one ran to my great-grandmother's house, and that's where they called for help and all. But there's even a picture of one of the boys with his head wrapped up and stuff. But the energy at that place is just undescribable. He was a teacher. And it goes on to talk about him being possessed. My great-grandmother said that he had gone to the doctor and told his doctor that he was thinking about killing his family. And but nothing was ever mentioned. And then I think she said it was about a week later he did. And he shot himself in the head. But that's
like The Shining.
It is. It's so scary. He had to be possessed, though. I don't get it.
I'm looking at the energy right now, and it absolutely looks like possession. They're showing me Amityville Horror. They're showing Poltergeist. Yeah. They're showing The Shining. This is kind of the way they communicate, my spirit guides with me, to let me know some of the energies that are present. And absolutely. And, it's really sad that he's going to the doctor and saying, hey, I need some help. And they're like, he'll be fine. And then they send him home after he's saying he feels like he wants to kill his family or whatever he said. That's really something. Yeah, you're fine. Go home and eat an apple.
I know,
that's really
right?
something. So I'm going to jump in and I'll tell my scariest story, and then I'll hand it back over to Jennifer, and we'll ask Andrew if he has another one to tell too. So this is one of my, and I'll have you hit your mute there, Jennifer, so I don't hear any background. Thank you so much. And I'm going to tell everyone my brother's story. It's not necessarily my story, although I was front row and center when it happened. But this is in my own hometown, small town in southwest Michigan called Otsego. Very old part of town. My brother was renting a house in. He was renting an apartment in a house. And I was also just down the street because I lived right downtown because that's where I was running my massage business, and I lived in the building above that. So when I get a call from my brother just down the road, and he's like, Jenny, grab your sage and come down here. We got some activity. It's demonic. And I'm like, oh, shit. So, it's really just 4 really quick little blocks down. So I pack my sage. I bring a Bible. I bring a cross. I bring some Palo Santo, and I just throw it all in a bag. And I head on down to my brother's house. Well, I walk inside the door. And as soon as I walk inside the door, I notice immediately what my brother's doing. He's got a Ouija board on his lap. His buddy's standing across from him. It's on both of their knees, and neither of them are touching the centerpiece, the piece that moves. No one's touching it. They're above it like 2 inches, and it is zipping back and forth on this board. I almost passed out there. This is like about 15 years ago, so I wasn't quite as refined, so to speak, as I am now. But anyway, when I walk in, I'm like, Ronnie, get that off your lap. Don't touch that. And he goes, why? It's fun. Look at it. It's talking to us. It's telling us scary stories. And so I'm like, well, let me just see, if maybe I'm being a little paranoid. And so I started talking to the entity, and it was spelling out some answers. This is before I did a lot of channeling work. And it was telling me lies, and it was telling me things that weren't true. I could just tell. It was like you could just, how you can tell the energy of a liar or someone who's just trying to get your goat or get you riled up. And I'm like, Ronnie, just as I suspected, these are mid-range souls using this tool to fuck around with you, because that's what mid-range and low entity or low vibration entities want to do, is they want to kind of get your attention and play off your energy, usually end up scaring you and eating your fear, if I think that's the best way to describe it. So either way, I take the board from my brother, and I didn't want to touch it, but I was like, I'm taking this board. I took this board, I threw it in the dumpster. So it was behind this duplex that he was living in. It was an actual little dumpster, so I just threw it right in there. I come back in. We go and smoke some weed, talk about what happened. My brother's, freaking out still a little bit. We come out from smoking the joint from the back bedroom or wherever the hell we were to where the dining space is, and that fucking Ouija board was on the table, and there was no one else that lived in the house that would, walk in and out of that house and take shit out of the dumpster and put it on the table. No one would do that there. The roommates were there. My brother had one other roommate. He was there. So, and then just a couple other people. So I was like, fuck, we got to burn it. So we burn it, and we burned it, and we feel like we, got rid of some negative energy. A week later, my brother moves out, and this is why he moved out. Not that I would think that would be enough to have someone move out, but this is what actually forced him to move out. So about a week later, his bedroom was upstairs in this duplex, and he comes out of his room not feeling good. And my brother's very sensitive like I am. And he goes, Jenny, it felt demonic. It felt bad. I got pushed right out of that room. It was so bad. So he leaves the room. And as he's leaving the room, he's yelling, talking to his girlfriend behind him, who's also in the room, saying, come on, Ashley, let's go downstairs. It doesn't feel good in here. And as he's walking around out the door, she screams bloody murder. And he's like, what? what? Is there a demon? There was a huge bat. I think it was probably 2 feet long or something. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but it was a giant bat on his back. And so he freaks out, rips his shirt off. They run out the door, never to come back to the house, maybe to get some clothes or something of that nature. But that was one of the scarier incidences I had, simply because I feel like there was some actual murder action down in the basement. So I feel like the entities were pretty negative. And I've never really seen a a Ouija board fly around the board like that, the centerpiece. So that was a real interesting experience for me. So let's see, Jennifer, you wanna start with your second one?
Yeah, I mean, you're involved in most of these because it's. I moved to my house. It was 2017. So 1930's been completely remodeled. I met you, which was awesome. The first thing that ever happened that really made me go, was I have a sofa bed downstairs. It's a couch, and I have 3 dogs. And they stay downstairs during the day when I work. But when I got home, the couch was just one side of it was nearly in the middle of the room. So how I actually met you is I walked over and I'm like, hey, did y'all see anybody at my house? Because it's really hard to move that couch. So I was like, there's no way the dogs could do it. And y'all had said no, of course. So I just put it back in place and didn't think too much of it. Not too long later, though, I walk in the back bedroom, which is downstairs, and there's a huge puddle of water in the middle of the room. So I'm like, well, one of the dogs peed in the house, and Trade, is huge. He's a King Corso, 160 pounds. And so I get a paper towel, and it's clear water. So I get a flashlight, and I'm looking all around the room like, where did this water come from? I'm thinking a pipe busted or something. Never could find where there's not nowhere. So you came and cleared a lot of energy not long after that. But there's always spirits in and out of here. That one night on the porch.
It was real scary. Oh gosh, I was going to say that night on the porch, Jennifer. Wasn't it near Halloween a couple years ago? Maybe 3 years ago. I can't remember the year, because if you moved into your house 2017, it was probably going on 3 years ago. And we were sitting on Jennifer's porch, and where Jennifer lives, it's this really cool hip part of Chattanooga called St. Elmo, and we sit out on the porch and we drink and do whatever the hell we want to swear, do whatever we wanted to do. And so one night it was just me and Jennifer, and we were jamming to Madonna and having a good old time. Probably drank way too much. In fact, we did. But the experience we had was experienced by both of us, so I know I wasn't kind of tripping on it. But what had happened was we were on her porch, and before I know it, I'm seeing all these entities moving toward us, like they're wanting to communicate with us. They're seeing our energy. The veil is thin. We're seeing stuff. And I was like, Jennifer, let's pick them off. So in our heads, we were like kind of picking them off and kind of like we were in a zombie movie or something, like picking off zombies and blowing them off. And we cleared out what I would think would be about a cemetery worth of entities that were kind of coming toward us on her porch. Now, we had been drinking, which often will lower the veils and bring in spirit, but either way, we were having an interesting experience. But not a block down from Jennifer's house is an actual cemetery, a very old one. So it felt like the Night of the Living Dead, and we told everyone about it, and they're like, you guys drink too much, and we're like, sure, yes, we probably did drink too much, but how are we both seeing the same things if it wasn't there? So everyone already thought we were cuckoo maruku, but they probably thought we were even more crazy then. But I was going to also tell them we had to do layers of healing, and I'm sure Jennifer still does sage that house because it's layered, and like she said, it's a refurbished 1930s house. Well, I had done a little bit of clearing there, like she had said, and she invited me back because one day, so first it was the puddle just in the center of the room with no water in that room or leaking or anything, no dog peed there. It was just very odd and peculiar, and I think Jennifer even did some reading after that. And didn't you say that was a sign that there was some demonic or poltergeist kind of energy, like they will put water in the center of the room, and it will be coming from nowhere. It's just there. So I was like, okay, let's do more clearing. Clearly, it's a very thick energy. we'll do some clearing. So I came to do what I think was the second or third. I'd have to guess it might be second or third clearing. So I pull into the driveway, and I've got all my stuff in my bag, and I'm getting ready to come in. Well, I not only just pulled in, I didn't even get my bag in my hand to try to even get out of the car. There was a huge branch that fell on the front left driver panel of my car, and I have an old Subaru, so it's metal, and it made a huge dent, and it came down hard. And if I would have gotten out of that car probably 1 second earlier, it would have smashed me. It might have put me down in a bad way. So I was like, fuck, Jennifer, sorry, I don't know what happened to your tree here. It just fell out of my car. And we noticed that it was I think it was Jesse, Jennifer's boyfriend, was like, that's a live branch. And that just fell for no good reason. And that's interesting. And we all started wondering, oh God, am I strong enough to, heal this demon out of the house? And we came to the conclusion, indeed, I was, because it wanted to take me out. So I went in and we did the clearing, and I'm sure you've had a little bit of activity since then, but I think we did a lot of clearing that time too.
Yeah, we did. And I think that it was that night on the front porch that we were drinking too, because I said, Jenny, I think it's a shapeshifter because I keep seeing this old woman. And I was like, but she's so nice. And you're like, she's not fucking nice. She's demonic. And so you start cussing her and you cleared her. And then I was like, but I think there's a little girl there too. And so, yeah, you was like, it's a shapeshifter. So it was just, it was like a portal almost.
That summer was one of the most incredible summers, and it was like the portal was opened and our energies together were able to kind of really pull it out. But yes, I remember very much sitting on your porch and getting a cold, eerie feeling when you said it's just a little old woman. I'm like, it wants you to think it's a little old woman, but really it's a negative vibe. So do you get much lately? Have you seen any sparks or any extra activity, or has it cooled down since then?
Somewhat it's cooled down. My bedroom, so I have like 4 recessed lights in the ceiling and then the fan light. And my bedroom light, I can always tell when some shit's about to go down, in my life, because that bedroom light will start flickering. And I mean, it raises hell. So Jesse actually removed the bulb from that because it got real bad there for a while. And his dad's a master electrician. So, I mean, I had him come over and make sure, it wasn't in the wiring because I was like, is my house going to burn down? It was so bad. And then, just small stuff here and there. What's interesting is I had it's a framed fan of my, I guess she would be my great-great-grandmother, her Granny Hubbard. And they always said she was a witch. And so I had that before I got a divorce, and then my Nana wanted it back because she thought I was not responsible enough to keep it again. But then she recently gave it back to me, and so it's hanging in the house. And it seems like since I've had that, it's really, really calmed down. It's cool. Hey, do you remember that day, too? I sent you a picture of an apple, and I'm like, hey, you forgot your apple? And you're like, that's not my apple. And I'm like, it's not my apple. And Jesse was like, there's 3 people in the house and nobody put an apple there, but that apple was on the dresser in the back bedroom. That was so weird.
That is really weird. And just for our listeners, I want to kind of describe a little bit of the different kinds of entities you could have in your home. And I've done enough clearings to have definitely met a couple of different kinds. The ones that move things around, like the one that was in Jennifer's house, we'll call it a mid-grade poltergeist. They're moving things, putting water in the middle of the room, trying to get a scare, moving couches. That is a rather strong entity, because in order for an entity in a different frequency to muster up enough power to move something rather physical, and my science will say it's 99% air, even the chair you're sitting in, but in my opinion, very physically heavy in this dimension, they're moving it. So there's that mid-grade or mild poltergeist and or not the greatest vibed entity. And then there's ones that just have kind of like what we would call on repeat. Like every night at midnight, you'll see a ghost of a woman. That is usually residual energy of a trajectory playing itself out over and over. And usually there's no actual soul in that trajectory. It's more like a skipping record. And then you can have entities that are not mid-range. They're old-souled or high vibe. They're just in the non-physical, and they come to visit you. And then there's the ones that can kind of be high vibed, but yet haven't crossed over to the non-physical or heaven and kind of kick around our dimension a little longer for whatever reasons. Usually it's because they don't know they're dead or they're just kicking around. You get choice, you got free will. So there's a lot of different types of entities. Just because there's an entity in your home doesn't mean that it's wildly negative. Now, I'm going to tell a real quick story, and we're going to hand it back over to Andrew if he's got something after me. But I grew up listening to scary stories like Jennifer did, with my grandmother telling disturbing stories, and I was fascinated. In fact, I'd retell them on the playground and get in trouble because I'd scare the kids. That was in elementary. But the one story that always got me, and this is what I would call straight poltergeist energy as opposed to like a mild poltergeist, maybe like Jennifer has. This is straight poltergeist because they were grabbing and hurting people. So this is really a rather negative energy. But my grandmother would tell this story. This probably happened when, early 80s, late 70s, so maybe when I was born, or maybe I wasn't even born at this point. But we had a good family friend. Her name was Judy, lovely lady. Well, she had a husband die mysteriously. And so what had happened was he had ran himself over. Now that's suspicious, right? How do you put a car and drive and then get out, and get in front of it and run yourself over? So there was a lot of odd behaviors, but they couldn't get any prints. They couldn't pin it to anyone. They couldn't find who was in the car, apparently to push it over him or to run him over. So they just said he must have got out of the car and it started rolling toward him and ran him over. Well, I guess Judy had to accept this as truth, and she's a young wife, probably in her 20s or at the very most 30s at that point. And so she just had to accept that as truth. A few days later, she's down in the basement getting laundry or something like that. Walking up the stairs, she hears something, so like a voice. So she turns around, and there's this cold energy, and it grabs her foot and drags her down the basement stairs. So she's freaking out, right? Because, well, she's getting actually physically dragged by something she can't see. And she's very young, and her husband had just died, so all this trauma. Well, she gets up out of that house and runs to the car and leaves and goes and stays somewhere else. I don't know what she ended up doing with the house, getting rid of it or cleansing it. I don't remember that part of the story, but it always really disturbed me that there were entities that were in the non-physical that we can't see quite often that can actually physically touch us. And so that was my poltergeist story. And of course, if you've ever watched Amityville Horror or Poltergeist, that movie from the 80s, that gives you another little taste of that poltergeist energy. It's very powerful, but yet can be dispersed. But you have to have some trained professionals. I have been told a couple times by my teacher, leave that one alone. That one's just going to sit there. You're not going to make a mark on that. It's going to get you before you get it. And I'm like, done deal. So some things are worth saving and some things aren't. Andrew, we've covered a couple stories. Can you think of anything else you might want to add or anything come to your mind? Or have another story you want to tell?
I actually have two. I could tell my ghost story now, 20. Okay.
Yes.
My ex and I bought the house I live in now back in 2000. The house was built in 1917, and we used to have a nightly ritual where I'd be on the computer at night. I could see her peek into the doorway, and I thought, okay, that's my signal to get off the computer and go to bed. She always wore a white T-shirt to bed, so I see the white T-shirt, and I think, okay, out of the corner of my eye. And this went on for about a year or so. At the time, I was a lot heavier, and I was having problems sleeping. It was determined I had sleep apnea, so I went and got one of those CPAP machines. I don't know if you're familiar with those. Mm-hmm. It forces air to your mouth so you can sleep better. It keeps your it helps you breathe without snoring, basically. So I hooked it up, And the first night I used it, she said, you can't sleep in this bed. I can't sleep. It's too noisy. And the first one I had was very noisy. I plugged it in, and it's dark. I have my contact lenses out. I finally get to sleep, and all of a sudden she's right there next to the bed, and she's asking me, "Hey, how's that thing work?" And I was annoyed because I finally got to sleep, and here she's waking me up. So I explained to her how the air goes through the water chamber, and it basically filters and this and that, and then I put the mask back on and went to sleep. The next morning, I asked her. I said, "Why'd you wake me up to ask me how it worked?" And she said, "I know how that thing works. Why would I wake you up?" I said, "No, but you woke me up. And you still woke me up." And she said, "No, I didn't." I said, "Well, who else was there? I spoke to you." And she said, "No, you're crazy." And then I mentioned something to her about how she used to check up on me at night. And she said, because I said, "Well, now that I'm not sleeping in the bedroom anymore with you in the guest room, you don't have to check up on me and tell me to go to bed." She said, "I never check up on you." I said, "Every night you peek in to see you." She said, "I never do that." And I thought she was joking with me, so I thought, yeah, whatever. That night, she went out with some of her friends, and I was sitting in the living room watching television, and the dining room was to my right, but the lights were out in the dining room. But in the doorway, all of a sudden, I see a woman standing there. I had the corner of my eye. She's dressed as a nurse back in, like, say, the 60s or 70s. And as soon as I looked at her, she disappeared. But she either had her hair up or it was short. And she had one of those little, like, nurse caps on and the whole white outfit. And it was the strangest thing. After that, I never saw her again. And when my ex got home that night, I told her what I saw, and she thought I was crazy. But, I told her, no, there was a nurse standing right there in the doorway. And I've since found out that my neighbor, their house, either in the 50s or the 60s, a woman who lived there at the time committed suicide. So I'm trying to find out who this person was and if she worked at the local hospital.
Did you ever find any of that info?
No, the problem is my neighbor is in her 80s, and she keeps telling me she'll ask her sister, but she keeps forgetting. So I may wait until her sister's visiting one day, and I might invite myself over and try to find out.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because I live on a street where some people have been here for like a generation or two, so somebody has to remember something like that.
Incredible. That is an excellent story. You saw what they call, what is usually called a full body apparition then. That is pretty uncommon, and that is awesome. And I'm just taking a glance at the energies for fun, and it does look like some residual energy kind of peeking around, being curious. That does look like it has some soul in it, so there is a ghost as opposed to just residual energy. So very interesting. I love that story. Do you want to go ahead and tell your next one too, Andrew?
Sure. I figured it would make sense if she was a nurse. She probably wouldn't know what one of those machines was or how it worked. So that's why she was asking me about it. And I never knew.
That is
so
cool.
Interacting with a ghost. I was just angry, thought it was my ex. But anyway, and I haven't seen her. The funny thing is, ever since my divorce, I've never seen her again in the house. So I don't know if she moved on or if she just didn't feel the need to appear anymore. But
that is interesting. Usually they do move on.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe she felt she had to protect us or something, and her job is done now. I don't know. My next story is, this is back, he was really old, and whenever he wanted to go somewhere, I would take him because I figured, he's 14 years old. He deserves whatever he wants. I gave this dog. He was great. He was a German Shepherd Golden Retriever mix. So Christmas morning, I didn't have to be somewhere until about 10 o'clock. So he wanted to go out. We drove to a local park. We went to his favorite spot. It was a little dam, and it overlooked a pond, and we watched the sunrise. And I just happened to look up, and in front of me were 3 trees, and they looked incredible, the sky. So I just snapped a picture with my camera. And then I didn't think much of it until a few months later I saw that there was a photo contest. And so I entered my photo into the contest, and I got a call telling them I won first place. And I'm an amateur photographer. So it surprised me because I was up against professionals. The day I was supposed to get my prize, between me learning I won and getting the prize, my dog passed away. He was old.
Aww.
So I was kind of upset about that, and I thought, I hope you don't ask me anything about the photo, like where was this, what was your inspiration, and everything, because I know I'd lose it because I was really missing my dog. So it was at a local, like a historical farm. So I go to this farm, and they tell us, okay, we have an hour before we're giving out the award. Have just walk around and mingle, whatever. So there were hiking trails on this farm. I just wanted to be away from people because I was kind of upset about my dog. So I went up this trail above the farm, and I was looking around, and it was an old road. It turned into a hike trail, and no one was up there, and I decided to come back. As I was coming back down the trail, to my right side, like right next to me, I heard a woman say, "Hunters." And I turned, and there's nobody there, but I swear I heard a woman say, "Hunters." And then I said, "What? Who's there?" And then I said, "I heard that." And about 15 feet away from me, in the tree line, I heard my voice say, "I heard that." And that scared me because I thought, that's something intelligent. It's not an echo. It was my voice. So I thought, I need to get out of here. So I pretended I didn't hear it. I went right back down to the main building. They gave me my prize. Luckily, they didn't ask me about the photo, which was great. As I'm walking back to my car, I felt horrible. Like when my dog died, I was pretty sad. When I was divorced, I was upset. This felt like the bottom of my life fell out. I couldn't explain it. I felt hopeless, and I'm thinking, I just won this prize. Why do I feel this way? I feel horrible. And the whole way home, I just felt like nothing had any meaning to it anymore. And I got home, and I'm trying to figure out what happened. And a friend of mine posted something odd on Facebook. So I reached out to her. I'm like, "Hey, what's this mean?" And it turns out she wrote something weird, like she felt like she needed to hold somebody. And then right then and there, I thought, that's the way I feel. So I said to her, "Well, why don't you come over? I think we can help each other out." And so the next day, she came up. We had lunch. Came back to my place, and that's the weird thing is I felt like I needed to hold somebody, which is odd. So we're in my bedroom, we're holding each other, and it felt so good. And she asked me, "Do you want to do anything else?" And I said no, and because I wasn't even thinking of anything else at the time. I just wanted to be held. And I think I insulted her because after that I didn't hear from her for 6 months. She wouldn't return any of my texts or anything. But that's not where my mind was at the time. I just felt like I needed to be held. And then that next weekend, I received a call from a friend of mine who owned a bookstore. She used to own a bookstore here in the town where I live. And the building had two shops in it, her store and a little like deli next door. The woman next door just left bills behind and left a lot of people hanging. And she left like bad mojo in the building. She actually wrote graffiti in the back of the building of my friend, like something derogatory. So my friend brought in this shaman, and he was supposed to get rid of the spirit that whatever was causing the problem. And they somehow got this, I forget where they got this hot soup from. It was a real spicy vegan soup. And the idea was everybody there ate some soup, and we left some for the spirit. And we were all done, and they were full. We could tell them they can go now, and he was supposed to cleanse the building. So the shaman's doing these chantings and drumming, and all of a sudden something lifted. Whatever was in the building was gone. And the same thing happened to me. Whatever I felt, that weird feeling I had was totally gone. I felt so good. And then the Tuesday after that, I was talking to a guy who channels some kind of alien, at least he told me. I told him my story. He said, well, what I encountered in the woods was either a doe or a mother bear. And when they sensed I was mourning my dog, they were letting me know how they felt when a hunter took their offspring. So I sort of had this animal attachment. And I swear, if I wouldn't have gotten help, like I probably would have died. I mean, it was the worst I've ever felt in my life. It was. And since then, I've cut back on meat consumption drastically. I only eat chicken and fish. I'm thinking about maybe becoming vegan with me that much. Just having that feeling of them losing their offspring. It's crazy.
That is. You must have been like really open to your emotions from losing your pet and a pet that you absolutely love, and it probably left you open to catch some energies or entities, because that does sound like a partial possession with that overwhelming sadness and the dread and the hopelessness. Well, I'm really glad that the shaman came, and I'm glad that he did that soup trick. I've never had that kind of ritual, but that's awesome.
Yeah, supposedly once you feed them, they're happy and they can go. I'd never heard it either, but it worked. The building felt better. Was better, and I felt like something was lifted off me. But the worst part is I go into the woods to like get energized. That's where I go. So to have that happen to me there, which is the weirdest thing. I wasn't like in a haunted house or anything. It was the woods. You don't think anything will happen to you.
This is interesting. Yeah, and I think that it really was the openness of the missing of the grief and the missing of the dog. And I'm going to go back to my original statement, which, sure, there's energies going on. There's always energies going around. But if you can see it, feel it, and sense it, you're intuitive. So I'm going to go back to my original statement and say, indeed, that you have some old soul intuitive energies, and allowing you to see, feel, sense some extra senses, some extra things. That's excellent. Thank you, Andrew, for sharing your stories. Jennifer, have you thought of one that you want to come up with? Because I got one last one, but I want to hand it over to you if you've got another one.
I got so many. I just don't even know where to even start with that. I did want to go back to the one that I told earlier, and I don't know. I'll try to post this link so you can read the actual story, because this happened between 3 and 4 a.m., which I thought was just so weird. But no, I love your stories, so you tell some more.
I'm going to tell somebody else's story, but it's so good it's stuck in my mind as if it's my story. So this was told last year. We are Heart Over Ego Radio Network, and if you go to any major podcast app and search Heart Over Ego Radio, you're going to get all of our archived shows. Well, a year ago, we did a Halloween special, and one of my friends called in and told her story, and I'm going to retell it. I won't tell any names, but I will retell the story. It's excellent. It's like horror movie style. So my friend who called in, she's a psychic, she's a medium, and she's very, very skillful. She lives in Michigan, I'll tell you that much. So she calls in, she goes, I got a story for you, Jenny. And I go, lay it on us, Crystal, because I know that she sees really well. So I was excited to hear her story. So she says, well, I was young, single mom, probably in her early 20s, had a young 4 or 5-year-old. He's very sensitive as well. She doesn't know how sensitive she even is back then. So she doesn't have a clue about how sensitive he is. So she's just knowing that they're intuitive and aware and can feel and sense things. That's about all she knows at this point, because I think the kid's 18, so it's must have been about 14 years ago. So he says to her, Mom, I have friends, and they're imaginary, or they're not imaginary. He says, I can't, no one else can see them, but they're my friends, and we talk and we play. And she goes, oh, that's nice, because she's like, okay, when I was a kid, I had imaginary friends too. She was thinking, okay, normal. Well, that went on for a little while, and it was fine until he started waking up, not had slept very well, and started waking up in the morning and needing a lot more sleep and not sleeping at night. And she goes, what's going on? And she goes, my friends are making me play at night. And she goes, your friends that no one else can see? And he goes, yeah, what you call my imaginary friends, he says, wake me up in the night and make me play with them. And she's just got the hair on the back of her neck standing up, because she knows indeed good entities and good souls don't force or tell or make any entity do anything. So she's, kind of keeping a closer eye on this. And she says to her son, the next time they wake you up and they want you to play, you come tell me and I'll deal with it. And he goes, okay, Mom. A little 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid, So next night or that night, he wakes her up and says, Mom, they're there. They won't leave me alone. And I told them I have to go get my mom because you told me to come get you. And she goes, let's go. So she goes in the room, and she goes, there's nothing in here. And he goes, out there. And he pointed out into the outside out a window, and she sees 2 little old-fashioned fucking kids, like really creepy, almost see-through style, And she's like, those the ones? And he goes, yep, those are the ones. And she goes, let's go to the front of the house. And she's burning sage. And she goes out to the front of the house, and they're there. So they're following. And she says she doesn't know what came over her. She was so scared because she's being a little bit flashback to her own childhood where she had some trauma, and she's scared for her son, and she doesn't know what to do. And she's like a young psychic at this point, not even practicing, I don't think. So she said all the anger came up inside of her, and she started talking to these kids, and she's like, you better leave them alone. And they're like, we don't leave anyone alone if we don't want to. And then they smiled, and they all had sharp little jagged teeth. And she goes, I just freaked out and just put my hands out in front of me, and white light came out of her hands, just like Sookie in True Blood, if you've ever seen that show. And they exploded into a million pieces, and they never came back. So she comes back inside, and she goes, I think they're gone now. They never came back and kept her son up. They never came back to even see her son, and she never saw them again. So that is my last story. And there's something super duper creepy about little kid ghosts, because usually they're just giving you an image that you feel a little more comfortable with. Like Jennifer had the old lady, when really they're negative entities, demonic entities, low range entities. So that was my friend's story. And that one scared the crap out of me because, again, a little kid, sharp teeth ghost is a little too much for me. I'm like, just no. So if we are done telling stories, I feel like we were very efficient and wrapped that up nice. I want to let everyone know this is the Horror Magic Podcast. Next Friday, we'll be on with Allie Montgomery. She is going to talk about some Egyptian goddesses and some sex magic. So tune in. Go ahead to any major podcast app, search Heart Over Ego Radio, and you will find all the shows we have. We have an incredible amount of shows, 7 live per week, 3 uploaded. That's 10 spiritual shows per week for your listening pleasure as well as your spiritual advancement. I want to go ahead and thank my good friend Jennifer for showing up and my new good friend Andrew for showing up and sharing their stories. And again, this is Heart Over Ego Radio, and we are Horror Magic. And until next Friday, we will bid you adieu.